So, I've never used an iPhone before since my brother decided to get me this one. It's the iPhone 14 Pro and I've been using it for around 3 months now. Looking past all the hype around the dynamic island and 48 megapixel camera, this is actually a genuinely solid phone. In this video, we're going to talk about how my experience has been as a first-time iPhone user and why I don't think I'm going back to using an Android as my main device. So let's get started. Let's talk about the screen first, as it's what stood out to me, and it's literally the brightest screen you can get in a smartphone right now. It's a 6.1-inch OLED display that goes to an astounding 2000 nits of brightness, and just for context, the screen on Samsung's S23 Ultra, which just released like a week ago, goes up to 1750 nits. It has support for a variable refresh rate which Apple calls ProMotion, meaning it's a buttery smooth experience to scroll through feeds on this phone. I mean, you don't really realize it after using it for a while, but as soon as you, let's say, use someone else's phone which doesn't have a refresh rate of 120Hz, that's when you just know how much this has spoiled you. The screen combined with Apple's iOS software provides an experience that feels effortless, if that's the right word. Like all the animations from opening and closing apps to simple things like just unlocking the phone feel polished and very well thought out. The screen's refresh rate can go as low as 1 Hz, which allowed Apple to finally introduce an always-on display on the iPhone. But unfortunately, and despite trying, this is why I haven't managed to keep it on for more than a week. So when the feature initially launched, the entire lock screen of the phone used to dim down, including the wallpaper and notifications on the lock screen. Many people found this distracting, so Apple addressed that with the iOS 16.2 update, where we can now toggle the show wallpaper and notifications on or off separately. I immediately went ahead and toggled the show wallpaper to be off on the always-on display, but after using it for some time, what I didn't like is that first, the line that appears on the bottom of the screen always remains there, even on the always-on display. And not only that, there's an entire ring around the dynamic island that also always just stays there. I don't understand why they're doing this, like just turn off everything else on the screen. It just makes it look too complicated, like all I wanna see is the date and time and that's it. Maybe it just bothers me or something, but yeah, I've just left the always on display to be off. It's nice to turn it on for a change once in a while, just to stare at how good it actually looks with a custom lock screen. But that's my opinion about this feature, and for the most part, I've not been using it. One thing Apple has been getting right about the iPhone is how well it's built. Trust me, it's weird, but when you're holding the 14 Pro without a case, it literally feels like it's a piece of jewelry. And I'm not exaggerating, it has just the right weight to it, and the flat edges formed by the stainless steel sides make it easier to grip. I'm usually scared to use a phone without a case, and although I did end up getting the official Apple leather case, which has held up really well, and paired with the Spigen screen protectors I use, make the phone feel very safe without adding any bulk to the phone itself. But even without those, this is different. I can get a really good grip on the 14 Pro, and that just adds to the confidence factor when you're using the phone without a case. The steel sides form all the corners and edges on the phone. The glass panels for both the screen and the back side are sort of inlaid inside the steel frame, which Apple says makes the phone more durable. The back of the phone is a matte black finish, which honestly I really love, and just the way the 3 camera lenses stand out from the phone, it's an iconic iPhone look at this point, and it's got sort of a professional looking vibe which it manages to match up to with the actual photo and video quality. We'll get into that in just a bit. One annoying thing is that the stainless steel is a massive fingerprint magnet. It just makes it difficult to keep the phone looking clean, especially around the buttons and the alert slider. On the bottom of the phone is the lightning charging port, and from how I see it, it's the only thing that holds this phone back in terms of future proofing. This charging standard is not going to stay around for much longer, and due to the new regulations in the EU, Apple will be forced to either switch to a fully portless iPhone or a Type-C port. What I'm glad about is that this phone has MagSafe, which is basically a wireless charging system but with magnets inside the phone that align with the charging dock in a very satisfying way. So I can just pop it on my nightstand and it starts charging. Believe me, I have not used the charging port on this after the first 2 or 3 times after I got it. It's just so much more convenient to place your phone on a dock and leave it there to charge. What I feel is underrated about the iPhone 14 Pro is how well it manages to do the small things that we use our phone for on a daily basis. The haptic engine inside the phone is top notch, from when it vibrates during an incoming call to typing on the keyboard with the haptic feedback enabled. Also, I really appreciate how fast the iPhone manages to take pictures. It's instant with almost zero shutter lag. Just to know, most other companies are still struggling with this. Apple also gets the speakers right on the iPhone every single time. There's a clear stereo separation and all the lows, mids and highs are almost perfectly tuned to sound just right, from watching movies to just general entertainment videos on YouTube. The phone is also IP68 water resistant, so you can literally use this to record videos underwater in a swimming pool. I also really appreciate how easy Apple has made it to customize the lock screen and switch between different ones that you can save on the phone. And yeah, if you are into aesthetics, and the way the album art of a music track displays on the lock screen, it's just beautiful. It colors the actual wallpaper to a matching accent color, and all the controls are displayed on the bottom of it. If you don't want it to display like that, you can easily click on the album art and that contracts it to more of a notification styled layout. It's the small details like this that Apple pays attention to, and at the end of the day, that really adds up to how you end up feeling about using a phone, which I really appreciate. Now, let's talk about what you've probably been waiting for, the dynamic island. And I know Apple likes naming everything and have been trolled a lot for this one, but maybe I'm one of the few people who actually likes the name. I mean, it's dynamic for sure, and island, I'm not so sure about it, but I'll go with it. I mean, it does have a click to it. So finally, Apple did get rid of the notch, and now we have the dynamic island, which is essentially an elongated pill cutout that sits on the top center of the screen and houses the selfie camera besides Apple's face recognition technology. Can I just pause for a bit from the dynamic island and say that Apple's Face ID is the best authentication system in any smartphone. This is coming from someone who loved the back-mounted fingerprint scanner that was on the OnePlus 5T and thought nothing could beat that. But I'd never realized that you need to actively put your finger on the scanner. With Face ID, you literally don't have to do anything except look at your phone, which, I mean, you're already looking at your phone if you're trying to unlock it, aren't you? There's a countless number of times I unlock my phone when it's on the table and I just have to single tap on the screen. It shows this really fluent animation on the island, my notifications become visible, and I just have to swipe up to get to the home page. It's fluent and, more importantly, it's very fast. Many people have said that Apple should allow you to choose to disable the swipe up, so as soon as the phone recognizes your face, it takes you straight to the home screen, and I don't think that makes much sense to me, as most of the time I just take out my phone from the pocket to take a quick glance at the notifications. If it took me to the home screen directly, I would now have to swipe down to see the notifications, which is not really ideal. And by the way, swiping down for notifications is not as easy on iPhone as it is on Android, because you have to specifically swipe down from either on top of the dynamic island or the left corner of the phone. Swiping from the right corner brings up the control panel. It takes some time to get used to it, but it's not a big deal. Like on Android, the lock screen and the notification panel are clearly two different pages. But on iOS, and it's been like this for years, but the lock screen is essentially the entire notification system for the iPhone. I'm not saying it's bad, that's just how it is, and at this point, I'm so used to it. So now, let's get back to the dynamic island. I've said that so many times till now. What you need to know is that if you choose to use an iPhone 14 Pro or a Pro Max, there is no escaping it. Like, you can't disable it or something. It's built right into the operating system and is very tightly integrated with the system software, the iPhone's hardware, and even the applications on the phone. It keeps expanding out from this pill cutout in such a smooth manner. Sometimes you can even be mistaken that the actual pill is expanding. They've really nailed all the animations on it, from the simple animation that works on the lock screen every time you unlock the iPhone to the Face ID animation that bubbles up when it's trying to authenticate a transaction on maybe a banking app. Even switching the phone from silent to ring mode using the alert slider triggers the island to expand, and it just makes it feel so fluent. When you swipe down to enter one-handed mode, the island also comes down, and whenever you tap on it or pull it when it's kind of idle, it actually responds to your touches and slightly pulls around with an elastic sort of effect. I mean, Apple didn't have to go the extra mile and do that, but it goes a long way to make the whole phone feel more alive and responsive. With iOS 16.2, Apple also added live activities to the iPhone 14. So now, let's say if you want to constantly keep track of a soccer match, I can pin that to the lock screen and the dynamic island. It's then going to remain there and show the live scores of the match on the lock screen with real-time updates. You can literally see the active match timer on that notification, and when using other applications, that information stays up on the dynamic island without interfering with anything else. Same with Spotify. I can play a song, and when I swipe up to go to the home screen, it sort of bounces the app inside the island and stays there. I can then single tap on it to go back to the app or long press on it to get to the controls. It's so well integrated with the system that it makes you forget about it. And that, it's hard to explain, but when you get so used to a feature that you don't even realize you're using it, that's a win for Apple. You have to give it to them. The dynamic island is a sort of a feature that makes you feel like, why hasn't it been like this all this time from the start, since we started seeing notches and hole punches on smartphones? You get the point. I was hyped when they initially announced it, and it's managed to meet all my expectations. So, well played, Apple. Just before we talk about the cameras, let me tell you how my battery life experience has been with the iPhone 14 Pro. To put it in a simple way, it lasts me 1.5 days of normal daily usage, which includes general browsing of social media applications, using iMessage and FaceTime, playing Genshin Impact once in a while, which the A16 Bionic chip inside the phone absolutely crushes, and taking photos and videos once in a while. Overall, I'm not in any way disappointed with the battery life. But again, with at least the smaller iPhone 14 Pro, it's not going to shock you by lasting, like 3 days of heavy usage. It's just a very consistent, good battery life smartphone. Finally, getting to the cameras, these 3 sensors here. A 48 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel 3x telephoto camera, and a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. I've been taking many photos and videos on the iPhone 14 Pro, and as you can see from the samples here, they come out to be really great pictures even in difficult lighting situations. The main camera manages to retain a lot of detail in the images and most of the time gets the skin tones and lighting right. The ultra-wide camera comes in very handy when you just need a lot of perspective to fit in a single frame, and the 3x telephoto camera completes the package of getting really crisp looking shots no matter the focal range you choose to use. When it comes to videos, I'm sure you must have heard that iPhones do it the best, and I found out for myself it's actually true. Recording up to 4K at 60 frames per second, this phone manages to capture insanely good video. It nails everything from handheld stabilization to autofocus, and it's safe to say that if you want a phone that can shoot the best video, don't think too much about it and just get the iPhone 14 Pro or the Pro Max. There's just no way you'll be disappointed. By the way, let me know in the comments below if you'd want me to do a camera focused video on the iPhone 14 Pro. There's so many details we can get into and maybe even compare it to other smartphones. To wrap up the review, I'll keep it simple. If you use an iPhone that's released after the iPhone 12, you don't need to upgrade to this phone. But if you use an older iPhone or are an Android user who wants to try out using an iPhone, this is a very solid device and probably at the top of my recommendation list if you want to use an iPhone. I'll probably do an in-depth video of my experience using iOS 16.2 every day, as at the core, that's what makes using an iPhone feel different from using anything else. So be sure that you're subscribed to the channel to watch that video when it drops. For now, click here to watch 15 Windows 11 features that you really should be using, or click here to watch my hands-on impressions with Samsung's S23 series of smartphones. Catch you there.